Alright, we're back at the house. Had a really good time out there at Six Summer. Actually improved our average by a little over 200ths for the week. But wanted to go ahead and make a few changes. I was going to do this before we left, but I didn't want to make too many changes. I knew the combination that I had would go, if everything went as it was supposed to, I would have been able to do like a 8-1 something every day. But that wasn't how it turned out. We had transmission issues and that kind of messed us up. Plus, Byron, we didn't count anyways, but that track was not stellar for radial, and I think Tri-State was not so great either. So, one thing we noticed that was an issue was the inlet air temps and the amount of boost that I'm running. The inlet air temps are getting really hot, and for the boost that I'm putting through the engine or trying to put through the engine, it's not making as much horsepower as it should. So, when you talk boost numbers, all that is a measure of restriction. So 30 pounds of boost on like 862 head that I'm running is not going to make nearly as much as, a head that can flow over 300 CFM or what have you. So, we're making 800-ish to a little bit over 800 max on like 30 something pound. Like, I think we're tickling 30 pounds of boost, and that should be making closer to, I'd say, 1300 horsepower for that boost number, if you have the supporting camshaft and you have the supporting heads that can flow, Plus, you have other issues like these turbos. They're only 6673s. They're box Borgs. It's just a cast wheel. It's nothing special. So there's some restriction there as well. So I went ahead and got some cylinder heads. These are Texas Speeds cylinder heads, PRC. Right here. They are an as-cast. They are 225 intake runner cc, and I think they flow at right over 600 lift, just right over 300 CFM. So that'll be a good improvement over the 862. Plus we get thicker deck surface. So, the more cylinder pressure you make, the more, it's going to try and lift ahead. And if you don't have a cylinder head that has enough rigidity to hold its shape, then it'll start flexing, cracking, and then you'll start having combustion gases getting in places they're not supposed to, and you start burning stuff up. So we're going to try to avoid that. Also, on the way, we'll be here tomorrow, is the Brian Tooley the stage 3 turbo cam, which is like a 230, 235, 114 plus 4 LSA, which I think it should, for what I want to do, is going to bring that RPM curve up just a little bit more, start making some power out closer to 7,000. Currently, I have a sloppy stage 2, which is still 230 something, but I think the duration on it is only, don't quote me, 112, something like that, maybe 113. But I think the Brian Tooley is going to do a little bit better for what we want. Currently, the power starts falling off at right around 6,500 RPM. And I'm shifting to 7,300, and the RPM drop is close to 800, so it doesn't stay in its ideal operating range for long enough. So we're gonna make these changes, along with fixing an oil leak. I believe it's the rear main seal. I didn't use the little tool to align it, so that might be what's causing that problem. It could be a fitting up here, but I don't know. I'll have to look into it and see where all that oil is coming from. It's just hitting the flywheel and just slinging it, so it's made quite the mess up under there. So I really need to get in there and brake clean or whatever, what have you, to clean all that mess out of there. But I'm gonna go ahead and start tearing this thing down, making sure everything still looks good, and throwing these new parts in over the weekend. All right, I got the engine out. Gonna do a little bit of cleanup. Just wiping everything down on the inside. There's quite a bit of oil. There was like 3 leaks. One, I think, is the rear main seal. And then this, where I'm picking up my oil pressure from, I believe it's leaking down there. And also, I didn't even notice this. This dipstick was never actually sealed in there, so I had to figure that out. So it was leaking a little bit down there. So all I have to do is change the cam in this and the head, so that shouldn't be too big of a deal. The plan right now, I'm going to front half this thing, so I'm going to cut it probably from right there and do a tube front end from there and figure out how to get the strut bars where I need them. I'm going to put some strange struts on here. Don't really have the budget for those, so I'm actually going to take them off of the 240. I don't really like doing that, but I think for the speeds we're going, since the 240 doesn't have an engine right now, I think it's the best call, just to make sure we're on the safe side and everything's going to work out properly. So, yeah, we do that. We're going to do a pinto rack and pinion, so pretty much the whole front suspension setup from the 240. I may keep this little bumper. I'm not too worried about it. I may just bend a tube kind of like that for the front. And then we've got gonna order a fiberglass front end and doors. So these doors are gonna be lightened up quite a bit. The front is gonna be lightened up quite a bit. So we're looking to drop at least 100 pounds. So that'll put us at about hopefully 2,200 pounds, maybe a little bit less. So that'll be better for power to weight ratio. Since we're not gonna have as much horsepower as some of the other guys, I think our advantage is we're gonna be lighter. So that's the plan as of right now. All right, so I got that cut off. I'll go look at the little section. The little front end section, I may keep the front bumper deal, maybe not, I'm not sure. But that end pulled off the stock front suspension. They're actually a little bit heavier than I thought, so I might be saving a little bit more weight, along with replacing this hood. This deal and that is probably a good, a little over 100 pounds, I would guess. I'm gonna put it on the scales and see exactly how much all that weighs. So then we have some tubing. So we're gonna run the tube down into here, and it's gonna kind of skirt the side. And then what I'm gonna do is plasma cut a plate, but then it's gonna have the little divot here that the tube's gonna go into, so all that will tie in pretty well there. Same deal here, we're gonna run it out. Probably gonna run it out an extra 5-ish inches, maybe a little bit more. I wanna be right at, I think 100 inches wheelbase. So I think maybe I'll do closer to 10 inches, something like that, or 8 inches. It'll be 10 inches to get, maybe go 98-inch wheelbase, same as the 240, something like that. So that'll be what, 6 inches we have to add on to it. I think I can do that. Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and start getting these tubes mocked up. First, gonna wire wheel and clean up this. Gonna put this out there and cover it, just so I don't get any shavings or anything. Gonna relocate all that stuff back there. The turbo stuff, just so we don't get any shavings or anything weird in it. Go ahead and unplug the ECU and all that good stuff before we start welding on it, just to make sure nothing funky happens. Never had an issue with that, but definitely don't want to start. So, good practice just to unplug it. However, the deal is, the reason things electronics get ruined is because you have your ground on the back side of the car and you're welding on the front. So if you can't unplug something or you don't have time, whatever, what you do is you put your ground as close as possible to the spot you're welding and make sure it's clean ground, so whenever you strike an arc, it's not trying to find a ground throughout the chassis. That's what ruins computers or any sort of electronics. So I'm gonna get working on that. All right, so I've got everything mocked up. I've got pretty much, I think, everything welded out. Brackets for the trans cooler, the brackets for, the shocks mounts, the lower shock mounts, tie rods, the rack and pinion, alternators mounted, everything's routed. I just have to get a little bit longer of a belt so I can swing this up so I can get my clearance right here. It's not the ideal way to do it because you do actually have to remove this upper hose in order to take the belt off. But that is the only option I have to still retain enough belt engagement on the crank so it won't slip. We got front runner Mickey Thompson's on some All-Star Performance. They're just the cheap wheels from Summit. Little motor mounts down there. All that's done. I've got to plumb the brake lines. I've got to get in the full-size radiator. That will be about 20 to 19 inches tall. Come down all the way here and will be 22 inches wide. So I was able to remove the little radiator with the extra radiator on the back. And then I had that radiator, the little one. Where did it go? Anyways, I had a little one back there. So that was 3 radiators. Now I think I'll only need the one. So that's good. That means less issues with trying to bleed the system. It was always a nightmare because the radiator was lower than the water pump or the highest part that the water goes into. But now what I think I'm going to do is take and cut this tube in half and put one of those little fill necks right here in line with it so I can fill it up right here, bleed the system really easily. And if I do have to take this hose off to replace a belt or anything like that, it's easy to get things filled back up. So the worst part is whenever you leave these cars for winter or you drive them around, you have to put antifreeze in them, or you have to put whatever water I don't think water wetter is an antifreeze, but you put salt water in it. I don't like doing that, so I fill mine up with antifreeze. But whenever you go to race it, it's always a pain to put water back in it and bleed the system. It's just not fun. So hopefully that'll make things much easier. For now, we are going to stick with the same Borg Warner 66s. There's a set of, well, you buy two. Anyways, it's a 72 millimeter. That's still a T4 flange. It's still the smaller profile turbo. It's S300, but it's capable of making 1100 horsepower per turbo. These max out at about 700 per, so that's about 1400 max. So I think eventually, and we're kind of seeing it depending on what the new heads do, we're kind of seeing where these turbos are just making a lot of heat. I'm not going to change the turbos just yet because I'm going to put some cylinder heads on here that flow about 100 CFM more than these stock 862 heads. So if that picks up and the inlet air temps drop back down to manageable, and ideally the boost will lower as well, because it was like 30 pounds of boost was only making like 850 horsepower. That's not right. There's just a ton of hot air in there. There's not nice, dense, cool air. The turbos were just working hard for nothing. It just wasn't making the horsepower it was supposed to. So hopefully getting the heads that can breathe and putting another camshaft in here that's a little bit more tailored for what we're doing will actually help this thing make the horsepower it needs to make. We are trying to make between 13 and 1400 horse with this engine here. It is a Ford short block. It's advertised to just 1,000, but the specs on the actual components themselves, the rods, the cranks, the pistons, they're all good to at least 1,500. So I think the limiting factor is kind of the block and just how you manage power. Keeping everything past the peak torque, not falling back into peak torque, so you don't, create a ton of cylinder pressure and start messing stuff up or chattering the block or, whatever. So we'll see how that goes with everything. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Turned into a little bit past a weekend project. Kind of waiting on some parts and stuff like that. So, but that's kind of how it goes with these projects. There's always some unforeseen issue. For the most part, most of it was repurposed from the 240. The material I already had chromoly, just the bits and pieces. It wasn't like a huge amount of tubing that needed. So I did have to spend a little bit on a radiator and some seals and a new cam position sensor, but that's kind of part of it. So I've got a few things I think I can sell to kind of mitigate the costs. So, but we'll should be back at it here pretty soon.